Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do a video on kind of a response video to one that Pastor Anderson has just posted called "Is it a sin to pay interest?" Probably more appropriate for him to have named this "Is it a sin to charge interest?" But he's going to talk about interest usury overall and who the main culprit, for this evil is being practiced worldwide. And it's against the Bible in multiple places to do this, and you don't even need the Bible to know that. It doesn't make sense, why there would be any need to charge people interest. If somebody loans something out, it should just be paid back. That's simple. The only reason we do need that potentially is if the person that you're loaning it to is not trustworthy and may not return it. But that's where at the local level, borrowing should be based on relationships, and joint risk taking. And if that's not the case, let's just say, a small amount, a very, very small amount. Let's say I have 10 silver coins and I lend them out to 10 different people and I don't know them that well. So I just put in a small amount to account for the fact that maybe one of them won't return them to me, won't return the coin to me. That's different. That's more like insurance. That's not interest, like just charging people periodic payments and all that kind of stuff. And, money fundamentally, anything, a coin, should not increase in value, over time. There's no reason for it. It's not changing its property at all, like whatever it is, a silver coin or even a dollar bill. There's no reason for its value to change substantially. And of anything, a coin, for example, should be able to buy more goods in the future than less. And so a healthy economy is actually deflationary, where things get cheaper over time because of human ingenuity, efficiencies, all that kind of stuff. And so so money is valuable really equally now and in the future. And so, interest is just, it's evil, and especially the amounts, the exorbitant amounts. And it's very, very clear, that it's evil. And just to cue this lesson up, I want people to keep in the back of their mind Revelation 2:9. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So this is in the book of Revelation. There's a group that's going to be posing to be Jews, and the real Jews are going to be poor. And so that's very, very different than the state of the modern day Jewish people. And then we'll see that they are indeed, the synagogue of Satan that's prophesied in Revelation 2:9 and in 3:9. So let's hear what Pastor Anderson has to say about interest and its evolution throughout history and modern day.
Ironically, who claim to just love the Torah and the Bible and so forth are the ones who are actually known for this more than anyone else. And in fact, if you study...
So he's talking about the Jewish people, pointing out a very, very good contradiction. How can people who claim to love, religious texts, God, all that kind of stuff, be the architects of this? And he'll highlight throughout human history, everywhere.
Study the history of the Jews. They have been hated of all men in every nation that they've pretty much ever lived in for the past few thousand years. And here's what people say: oh, they're hated because of the name of the Lord. No, the name of the Lord is Jesus. They don't claim that name.
So he, in his brain, again, God blocks him. He's not allowed to go there. But anybody with common sense should be like, how could these people be the chosen people? And I'm speaking to myself. There was a time where I sort of bought into that narrative that these are the Jews and all that. We all did, really, at one point or another. And so it's almost funny now. These group of people are in every different, nation, and everybody hates them. And so how on earth could these people be God's people? They would have to be the opposite of God's people. Like I just read in Revelation 2:9. They have to be Satan. Like, it's not like no group of people would get rejected by every single nation on earth. Like, that's not just a coincidence. It's not just like 0 for 1. Oh man, okay, we're 0 for 2. They didn't really like us there. 0 for 3. They're 0 for everything, and now the entire world hates them. And so it's just obvious. And so and I'm not even blaming the sort of lay person, the everyday person. This is a pastor, who claims to have some understanding of God and the mind and heart of God. He's not teaching people this, like, hey, they're not the chosen people. They're evil. And again, there are many verses that could be used to support this fact.
And people are trying to say, oh, it's just like the Bible said, they're hated of all men. No, no, no. He said you'll be hated of all men for my name's sake. His name's Jesus. That's the name where when they pronounce it, they spit on the ground 3 times. That's the name that they pronounce, let him be accursed. Okay? This is the one that they hate and execrate in their Talmud, their holy book, and talk about the fact that he is a wicked, you name it.
So how could they be the chosen people? This doesn't make sense. This is even further evidence. How could they be in any way connected to God when, like he's saying, their books speak against Jesus Christ, and defame him, and all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, he's building up a strong case, but he's not connecting the dots. I'm saying this rhetorically. This is an actor, that we're dealing with here. He's not allowed to make those obvious connections and go into the flat earth and all these other things, make it obvious. But I just want people to know that we're dealing with actors here.
They hate him. So that's not why they've been hated. So you say, well, why have they been hated? Why have Jews been? Now here's the thing. A lot of people, they just think, oh, they were just hated in one country, Germany. Isn't that what people think? Like, oh yeah, Hitler and the Jews, everything. But here's the thing. If you actually study history, they've actually been thrown out of scores of countries throughout history. If you look up a list of every year and what country they were thrown out of, it's a huge list. There are lists that you can find in history books that will show you this is what year they were thrown out of Spain. This is what year they were thrown out of France. This is when they were thrown out of Germany. This is when they were thrown out of England. This is when they've been thrown out of like every country in Europe in all these different years. Now here's the thing. If they were thrown out of one country at one time, then you might think to yourself, oh, it was that country that was the problem. But when they're thrown out of just a multitude of different countries in totally different centuries by totally different people, you have to ask yourself, why are they being thrown out of scores of countries over the course of all these different centuries? One of the most famous is in 1492, which is easy to remember because it's when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But in 1492, they were expelled from Spain. But I mean, they've been expelled from tons of countries.
He's telling us to connect the dots. He's not connecting the dots. So this again shows how stupid American Christianity is as a joke. I mean, America's a joke overall, so it doesn't surprise me that. And this guy is a bit more progressive about conspiracy theory. So he's not as bad as the average run-of-the-mill pastor. And he's still completely lost. And then we have a quote above him, the Hebrews, who are also lost, teaching, non-virgin birth and all that kind of stuff. So the religion, people just don't think and again, this has to be God doing this. So I'm just doing this for educational purposes. So he's kind of, again, speaking down to us if we were in his congregation, that we're not putting these things together. But it's like, dude, you need to figure this out. They're not connected to God. They are the complete opposite of God in everything that they do. Some of the rabbis suck a baby's penis blood for circumcision practices, routines, and giving the babies herpes and stuff. They are behind Hollyweird, all this kind of stuff. Homosexuality, of course, gay pride in Israel every year, Tel Aviv, all that kind of stuff. They're this lending practices. They're just, if you've ever been around them, they're just very they quantify everything, they're constantly, measuring themselves up against other people, all that kind of stuff. And they're very cliquish, they don't really like to associate with other groups for this very reason. They want to keep their power and their wealth, central, and core to them. And they're just odd people, there's no other way to describe it. There's no reason a human should go around and create businesses like this, just lending money out to people. And it's one thing if you're lending out money that is your own and then charging some amount of interest. That's one thing. That's evil still. But now they're lending out money that's ours through fractional reserve banking. And so that's even more sinister. And then on top of that, they're charging exorbitant interest rates. And then they're charging interest on things that should be like pretty cheap, like education, stuff like that. And so that's the whole issue fundamentally with the system that we have right now as well, is that if you get a loan for like a home, person's offering you a loan, but not taking any risk and involving themselves in the repayment. So you'll go to one place and get a loan for your house, and then they just make us fend for ourselves to figure out how to go and repay that back. And so the only way to repay that back is to quote add value into this system, but the system's completely evil. You just have to be a degenerate. You have to like dance, shuck and jive like a coon. You have to just be a moron, do stupid pranks, or just do something dumb, be an athlete, and all that kind of stuff. Like you have to go figure it out. And so the risk is now placed purely on the person who's taking on the loan and not the person who is giving the loan. And so that's the major problem. Normally it's two people who know each other, and then they're taking on the risk in some shared way. Doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50, but there has to be some amount of risk taken on by the person giving the loan. Like let's say 25%, 75%. They have to hear what your plan is, and have it make sense. So if the government's giving out the loans and then the government's not giving a way for people to pay back the loan in any kind of structured way, that's evil. And that's the system that we have right now. So people are encumbered with like mortgage debt, credit card debt, student loan debt. But the system that's in place, there's no productive way for them to pay that back. And so they're just encumbered with more and more debt. And then once you owe somebody enough, really anything at all, they own you fundamentally. And so this is the synagogue of Satan.
Give all the different years when they're thrown out of all these different. Why have they been hate? Well, two reasons. Number one, because of cursing the Lord Jesus Christ, and because once people figured out what the Talmud says, how blasphemous it is, and how satanic they are, that made people angry and wanted them gone. Okay.
So he can't figure out the fact that they have a completely different book, and that book curses out God, and they're Jewish just by the name itself. They don't know what the term Jew means. They don't know any of the other 12 tribes of Israel. They don't know anything about the Bible. They're not preaching anything in Israel right now. No one's like out on the streets, prophesying, speaking anything about the Bible in that part of the world. So any Christian out there, and I put Christian in quotes, who thinks that God is focusing his efforts on the Middle East and like there's some Middle East thing going on and like God's going to return and like the temple sacrifice will be restored and all that. I feel bad for you. You're an idiot. That's not what's happening. Those people do not care about Jesus Christ. They don't care about anything about the Bible. They will not honor in any way, any aspect of him. Definitely not that he's black, but everything from top to bottom. And so people who've been deceived, go for it. That's insane to think that anything in that part of the world will have any kind of interest in the Bible at all, ever. It just won't. And so for those who have common sense, the end times is focused here in America.
Number one. Number two is because of predatory lending and charging of usury made people mad. The banking and the usury and the payday loan type of a mentality that's been going on for centuries. And the Jews have become known for this as being the bankers. And even
they're not the Jews, they're Jewish.
Most famous arch bankers of the world. Who is the most famous villainous arch banker? Rothschild, right? And what's the symbol of the House of Rothschild? The six-pointed star. In fact, that's where it comes from.
A lot of the Hebrews were wearing that six-pointed star as well. And, Farrakhan, all these people, they're just actors.
In modern history. So therefore, Rothschild and these other Jewish type bankers, the Warburgs and the different banking families and everything, they become, just a picture of usury as Jews, when in reality, the Old Testament is speaking against being an extortioner, being a predatory lender, being a usurer, oppressing the poor, and so forth. And you know what? These predatory lenders, they oppress the poor more than anyone else.
Absolutely.
Rich people aren't the ones borrowing money down at the stupid payday loan place. And by the way, don't ever get a payday loan. Please. And don't...
What kind of advice is that as a pastor? This person literally is sick in the head. It's like people don't do that because they're just bored and they want to go to a payday loan on the way home. They do that because they need the money. And again, what's evil in our payment system is that people get paid once a week at sometimes, if they're lucky, but most times bi-weekly, once a month. And so like people have things to pay in between that time. So every corporation, we're giving them a loan every time we get paid bi-weekly. And so we're financing their own payments to us by allowing them to not pay us every day. And so it's not a big deal to be paid every day. You know, like they could easily do that, and they should absorb the cost for that. And so this guy is completely lost. Like he is just completely sick. He's completely out of touch. And again, it shows to me again that how America is evil, because even the Christian church is completely retarded.
Go to the pawn shop and borrow money, and these check cashing places that loan you money. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount that they charge, and people make really bad decisions, and they keep getting strung out and borrowing money from these places.
But you'll catch another video of this guy talking about the homeless and how they're lazy and they're a bum. They just go get a job, be productive. But like he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth. And so, but now he's saying, oh, the whole system's evil, you know, and like, don't do all these payday loans and all that kind of stuff. Payday loans I've seen videos on them where some of them are run by these large banks. It's their branch to like get the high interest kind of short-term loans. And, you know, so payday loans in all these buildings, you know, they have a presence and they're a company. And so like they're part of the quote economy. And so if he's stating that that is evil, then like all the things that are surrounding it are also evil. And then that's where people would look to get jobs. And so like this guy's completely lost. American Christianity is a complete joke if it's not already obvious to people.
And it's funny, they're always like exactly 1 week behind. So they're really not even getting any fresh money from these people. They're dealing the same money every week and just wasting money on interest every week. Just wasted.
So he's blaming us, the people who would go and get these payday loans, instead of the opposite side. So his title of this video, is it a sin to pay interest? Instead, he's not looking at the other side, you know, the people charging interest and setting up these structures. And so again, he's just set up. You know, this person is just an actor. No one could be this stupid, preaching one thing and then turning his brain off and then preaching something else.
But see, we can't just sit there and just blame them for being an idiot.
Yeah, we can.
You know, and borrowing money. And I mean, look, do people do stupid things?
Yeah, he's right. Like, we can't, you know, because again, the whole system is completely evil. We have to blame the system and the people that are architecting it. And then for those that are spiritual and have a bit of common sense, God is behind this. And so we ask God, when will this stop? That's it. It's very, very simple. And God says in the Bible to put a mark on those people who are sighing and crying for the abominations. We don't sigh and cry. We sigh and cry to God, because that's the only person that will listen. That's the only entity that will listen. This structure on earth is not going to change. And so the Bible says, put a mark on those who sigh and cry. And then there's going to be the mark of the beast for those who enjoy this system, you know, or at least comfortable with it. And so there's two types of people, you know. And so I would say anybody who's not crying out to God for this system to end is just completely satanic.
With credit cards, yes. Do people do stupid things with the pawn shop and the check cashing place and the loan till payday place? Of course people make dumb decisions, but you know what? If we study the Bible and make it our final authority, yes, we should try to tell these people, hey, you need to wise up and quit borrowing money from these people. But the Bible also condemns the people who are loaning it to them and charging usury, doesn't it?
Wow. That's a really big deal. Like he had to look around for people. Hey, do you agree? This is completely stupid. Like this whole world is just completely brain dead. Like everybody's a coward. No one wants to speak out against the evil. This guy's like looking to his congregation. If you go to the 4:43 mark, he's sitting there with the Bible in hand, looking around, like kind of seeing if people will agree with him. And so Christianity is a complete joke. Every leader is completely spineless and they're just an idiot. And so he's like somehow making like a point, like asking his congregation for permission to speak out against the obvious evils that are in the world. So, you know, if this place is not going to be destroyed soon, I would just say the God of the Bible doesn't exist.
I was condemning them as being a wicked person that would take advantage of people's stupidity. Look, there are stupid people in this world. Should we just go take advantage of them all?
They're not stupid. They're desperate. And so, again, this person's completely idiotic.
Well, it's their fault. They're stupid.
This is coming from a ball earther.
Guys, it's their fault. They're stupid people.
This guy believes we live on a spinning ball that's flying through a vacuum at like thousands of miles an hour, and he thinks like wherever he is in Arizona, like those buildings are moving every day, and he's talking about other people's stupidity. This place has to be destroyed.
I'm gonna make some money off of it. I mean, you think that's right? But people want to excuse the bankers, excuse the pawn shop, because they're dumb anyway. Okay, that doesn't make it right to steal from them. Okay.
Wow, what a caring guy. You know, no one wants to excuse them, you idiot. None of us are excusing them in the days that we live in.
Okay, and usury is unjust, and it's fraud, and it's stealing, and it's wrong. So I don't believe in it. Now, how would we apply this to our lives? Well, first of all, don't be a usurer. You know, you should not be one of these people who is the one lending out money to people and so forth.
It's not that it's like a fraud or stealing or anything like that. It's the fact that people don't acknowledge that it's God's. Everything is God's. So if God forgives us, we can't go and tax some other person before we forgive them. That's what it is fundamentally. And so we have to forgive them. And the way that it works in the forgiveness realm is it's like God has given us $1 billion and somebody comes up and asks us for $1 and we refuse to give it to them. God has the right and very justified to destroy us. Same kind of thing. If God gives us $1 and then somebody else asks us even to borrow it, like they'll actually give it back to us, we should be very inclined to do that, you know. And then God, if you have for people who are more generous and more actually want to be around God, like this person does not, they would be like, just take it. You know, I don't want the money, because then the less money I have here, that means that God will have to provide me with a new one. And if he doesn't, then I'll just be with God. And so this is what a real spiritual person, this is the way they would think, not this idiot. But so it's the lack of understanding that money is God's. Everything that exists, this table, this keyboard, my phone, everything is God's. He owns it. And the Bible says he controls everything. And so if God gives me $1 and then somebody that I know well, like again, this borrowing should be with people that we know on a local level, says, I need this. And then, you know, I will return that value to you at some time if you don't need that right now. And then, you know, you give that to them and then they give it back. And then if they have the desire to be charitable and give a little bit more, that's fine too. And then if they cannot bring all of it back and I just, you know, forgive that, that's virtuous. And then there are rewards set up in place for that in the kingdom and some potentially here. And so that's the right economic way of thinking for a quote unquote Christian. There are very few Christians out there on the world, and Pastor Steven Anderson is absolutely not one of them. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.